My mother-in-law hid a camera in my baby's nursery because she said she was worried about Lily, but what that tiny lens captured instead nearly cost her the only thing she truly cared about. I found it on a Tuesday morning while changing the fitted sheet on the crib, the kind with little pale yellow stars I'd ordered at 2 in the morning during one of those sleepless newborn nights when everything feels too quiet and too loud at the same time. Lily was 6 weeks old, finally asleep in the bassinet beside me, her tiny fists curled under her chin, her breath soft and even. I should have been folding laundry or answering the 3 texts my husband had sent about whether we needed more formula, but something about the stuffed rabbit on the nursery shelf made me stop. It was facing the crib too perfectly, tilted at an angle that looked less like decoration and more like attention. Margaret had brought that rabbit over 2 days earlier with one of her tight little smiles, the kind that never quite reached her eyes. "Every baby needs something special from Grandma," she'd said, setting it down as if she were placing a crown on a throne. At the time, I thanked her, even though she'd already criticized the temperature in the room, the way I swaddled Lily, and the fact that I still hadn't switched to the white noise machine she swore had made Ethan sleep through the night in 1989. I picked up the rabbit with one hand, expecting it to feel soft and light. Instead, it felt oddly heavy in the belly. My thumb brushed over a seam that didn't belong there, and when I turned it over, I saw the pinhole lens hidden behind the stitching of one black button eye. For a second, I just stood there, staring. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe properly. My knees gave a little, and I sat down slowly on the nursery rug, still holding that rabbit in my lap like it was something alive and dangerous. The room around me looked exactly the same as it had 5 seconds earlier. The ivory curtains moving in the air from the vent, the rocking chair in the corner, the stack of burp cloths folded on the dresser. But suddenly it didn't feel like my daughter's room anymore. It felt watched. And the worst part was, deep down, I wasn't even surprised. For weeks, Margaret had known things she should never have known. She'd called me at 7:12 one morning and asked, "Why did you let Lily cry that long last night?" She'd shown up with gas drops after I'd whispered to Ethan in our kitchen that Lily seemed fussy after her 2 a.m. feeding. She once looked me dead in the face and said, "You really should stop scrolling on your phone while the baby's awake." Even though the only time I'd done that was alone in the nursery, while Lily kicked in her swing for maybe 3 minutes while I ordered diapers. Every time, Ethan brushed it off. "Mom's just observant," he said. "She notices everything." No, I remember thinking then. She watches everything. My hands were shaking, but not enough to stop me from checking the rabbit again. Tiny charging port. Tiny reset button. Tiny proof that I wasn't imagining any of it. I looked over at Lily, still asleep, completely unaware that her first weeks in this world had already become part of someone else's private theater. I should have marched straight downstairs, called Ethan, and told him exactly what his mother had done. I should have ripped the camera out and thrown it in the kitchen trash. Instead, I stood up, smoothed the nursery rug with my foot, and placed the rabbit back on the shelf exactly where I'd found it, facing the crib, angled just so. Then I looked straight at that tiny black eye and smiled. Because if Margaret wanted to watch me, I was going to let her. And this time, I was going to see what she did when she thought no one was watching her. For the rest of that day, I moved through my own house like I was learning it for the first time. Every room felt familiar, but not safe. I warmed a bottle, folded 2 tiny sleepers, wiped down the kitchen counter twice, and all the while I kept thinking about that rabbit on the nursery shelf, sitting there with its little stitched smile as if it belonged. Lily woke just after noon, hungry and fussy, and I carried her into the living room instead of feeding her upstairs like I usually did. It was instinct at first, almost animal. I did not want to sit in that nursery and wonder whether someone was studying the way I held my own daughter. I settled into the corner of the couch by the window, where the light was soft and warm, and fed her there while she blinked up at me with those wide gray-blue eyes that still had not decided what color they wanted to be. Her tiny hand rested against my wrist, and for a moment, I had to look away because the lump in my throat felt too big to swallow. I had spent 6 weeks trying to become a mother in the middle of exhaustion, leaking bottles, burp cloths, pediatrician appointments, and the kind of fragile emotions no one really prepares you for. I had done it while being corrected, interrupted, and quietly judged by a woman who seemed to think giving birth to my husband 36 years ago made her the permanent authority on every child who came after him. The signs had been there from the beginning. I saw that now. The first time Margaret came over after we brought Lily home from the hospital, she did not ask how I was feeling. She walked straight past me, washed her hands at the sink without saying a word, and reached for Lily before I had even taken off my shoes. "Let me hold her before you get her all worked up," she said, as if I were a babysitter and not the mother who had spent 20 hours in labor bringing that little girl into the world. When Lily cried during diaper changes, Margaret would appear in the doorway like she had been waiting just outside. "You have to be quicker," she would say. "Babies can sense panic." If I swaddled too tightly, it was wrong. If I swaddled too loosely, it was dangerous. If I rocked Lily to sleep, I was creating bad habits. If I put her down drowsy but awake, I was experimenting on a newborn. She never raised her voice. She never had to. Her judgment came wrapped in smiles and little sighs and that soft, sugary tone women like her used when they wanted to sound helpful while drawing blood. Ethan heard some of it, but never enough. Or maybe he heard all of it and had spent his whole life translating it into something easier to live with. "That is just Mom," he would say while scrolling through emails at the kitchen island. "She means well." He said it when she reorganized our pantry because she thought the baby bottles should be closer to the sterilizer. He said it when she let herself in with the spare key one Saturday morning and found me still in pajamas, then spent 10 full minutes talking about how concerning it was that I had not showered by 10 o'clock. He even said it after she asked if I was sure I wanted to be alone with Lily all day in this emotional state. As if postpartum tears over a detergent commercial meant I was one bad afternoon away from collapse. Back then, I let myself believe I was being too sensitive. Sleep deprivation does strange things to your confidence. It makes every criticism sound possible. It makes every silence feel like proof. But sitting there with Lily in my arms and that hidden camera upstairs, everything rearranged itself in my mind with a horrible kind of clarity. Margaret had not just been criticizing me. She had been collecting me, studying me, building a case out of ordinary moments and tired mistakes and private hours that never should have belonged to anyone but me and my child. And once I understood that, I stopped feeling hurt. I started paying attention. That evening, I did something I had not done in weeks. I stopped reacting and started planning. Ethan got home a little after 6, loosened his tie in the foyer, kissed Lily on the forehead, and asked if we needed to add diapers to the grocery list. He looked tired, distracted, normal. That almost made it worse. I watched him set his laptop bag by the stairs, watched him step into the kitchen like this was any other Tuesday, and I wondered how much of my life had become ordinary to him in all the ways that mattered least. I did not mention the rabbit. Not yet. Instead, I made pasta, because that was what I had already thawed, and because there was something almost comforting about the sound of water boiling while your whole world quietly tilts. Margaret called halfway through dinner. Her name lit up Ethan's phone on the table, and he smiled the way he always did when he saw it, with that reflexive softness sons like him never seemed to lose. "Hey, Mom," he answered, putting her on speaker while he grated Parmesan. "How is my angel?" she asked, and she did not mean me. Ethan angled the phone toward Lily and her bouncer. "She had a pretty good day," he said. "Claire finally got her down for a real nap this afternoon." Finally. Such a small word. Such a revealing one. I kept my face still and twirled pasta around my fork. Margaret made a thoughtful little hum on the other end. "That is wonderful," she said. I was beginning to worry she was overtired. Babies get so dysregulated when their schedule is inconsistent. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Lily had taken that nap in the nursery at exactly 1:15. I had not texted anyone. Ethan had not been home. And yet Margaret said it in that careful, polished tone like she was commenting on the weather, as if she had simply sensed it from across town. I glanced toward Ethan, waiting for him to notice. He did not. "Mom, she is 6 weeks old," he said with a laugh. "She does not exactly have a schedule yet." Margaret laughed too, but hers had a sharp little edge to it. That is what young mothers always say before they end up overwhelmed. There it was again. Not direct enough to challenge. Not soft enough to ignore. I stood up, carried my plate to the sink, and let the water run longer than necessary just to give myself a second. I was beginning to understand that Margaret's real talent was not cruelty. It was calibration. She knew exactly how far to push before Ethan would hear concern instead of control. Later that night, after Lily's bath and bottle, I carried her upstairs and did something deliberate. I sat in the rocking chair directly in the line of sight of that rabbit and pretended not to notice it. I spoke softly to Lily while I buttoned her sleeper, humming the same off-key lullaby my mother used to sing to me. And then I looked around the room the way any tired new mother might. Not searching, just existing. I wanted Margaret to think nothing had changed. I wanted her to stay comfortable. When Lily drifted off, I laid her down, pulled the blanket to exactly chest level, and left the room without adjusting the rabbit. Then I went downstairs, opened my laptop, and spent the next hour learning more about indoor cameras than I had ever wanted to know. Most models stored clips to an app. Some needed a shared wireless connection. Some kept event logs. Some even listed linked devices. By midnight, I had a notebook open beside me and 3 pages filled with times, comments, and moments I could suddenly explain. 7:12 a.m. call about the crying. 2:14 a.m. gas drops. Saturday, 10 o'clock pajama judgment. The pieces were no longer scattered. They were lining up. And the more they lined up, the colder I felt. Because the camera itself was invasive. But the pattern behind it was something worse. Margaret was not just checking in on her granddaughter. She was measuring me in private, then presenting those measurements back to me as if they were instincts, as if she knew me better than I knew myself. I closed the notebook, looked toward the dark staircase, and made a decision that felt terrifying and strangely steady at the same time. If she wanted to keep watching, I was going to give her every chance to make a mistake big enough that even Ethan could not explain it away. The next morning, I waited until Ethan left for work before I touched the rabbit again. He kissed Lily, promised he would be home early, and reminded me that his mother might stop by later with the casserole she had apparently decided we needed. I smiled and said, "That is nice," in the same calm voice I had been using since Tuesday, and the moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I locked the front door and carried that stuffed rabbit downstairs like evidence. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, a cup of coffee gone cold beside me, and turned the toy over in my hands until I found the tiny reset pinhole. I was careful, too careful. The kind of careful you become when you realize one wrong move could warn the person you are trying to catch. After 20 minutes, 3 online manuals, and a level of patience I did not know I still possessed, I found the brand printed in tiny gray letters beneath the battery flap. It was not a baby monitor brand. It was a home security brand. Sleek. Expensive. The kind of device that synced to an app and quietly uploaded everything to the cloud. My stomach tightened. Margaret did not buy things like that by accident. I downloaded the app, entered the model number, and followed the setup instructions until it prompted me to connect to the local wireless network. Ours. Of course. I stared at the screen for a long second, then tapped through to the device list on our router settings. There it was, tucked between Ethan's work laptop and the smart thermostat, a generic label that meant nothing unless you were looking for it. It had connected 48 hours earlier, the same afternoon Margaret had brought over the rabbit and told me the nursery finally looked organized enough for a baby. I could still hear the smile in her voice when she said it. My fingers moved faster after that. Device logs. Connection times. Signal activity. I did not need to understand every technical detail. I just needed enough to know I was not imagining things. The camera had been active in the nursery for 2 full nights and nearly 2 days. I sat back in my chair and pressed my palm flat against the table because my hands had started trembling again. Then I made the mistake of checking one more thing. I opened the guest access settings Ethan had set up months ago for visiting family, mostly so his parents could use the wireless when they came over. Margaret's phone was listed by name. Not unknown device. Not guest one. Her actual phone. She had been on our network more often than I realized, sometimes for hours, even on days she had only stopped by for a minute. I was still staring at the screen when my phone buzzed. Ethan. I answered on the second ring and tried to keep my voice even. Hey, he said. Quick question. Did Mom ever show you how to use that white noise machine she brought? She said she noticed Lily seemed restless during naps. The room went still. I looked at the app. I looked at the rabbit. Then I looked at the clock. It was 11:17 in the morning. Lily was asleep upstairs. I had not texted him. I had not texted anyone. No, I said slowly. She did not. There was a pause, and then Ethan laughed, casual, distracted, the sound of keyboard clicks behind him. She probably just guessed. You know how she is. There. It was again. That sentence. The one that turned every violation into a personality trait. Something in me hardened so completely that it almost felt like relief. "Ethan," I said, and this time my voice was so calm it surprised even me. "Did you ever give your mother access to anything in Lily's room?" Silence. Not long, but long enough. Then came the inhale, the hesitation, the tiny shift in the air that tells you the truth arrived before the words do. "Claire," he said carefully, "do not make this bigger than it is." I closed my eyes, not because I was shocked, because suddenly I was not. "What did you do?" I asked. He lowered his voice the way people do when they already know they are guilty. "She was worried about you being alone so much after the birth. You were exhausted. You were crying a lot. She said a camera in the nursery would help all of us feel better, just for a little while. She thought if Lily had trouble breathing or something happened while you were sleeping, she could call. It was supposed to be temporary." For a second, I could not speak. Not because I did not know what to say, but because there were too many things at once. Anger, humiliation, betrayal, and beneath all of it, something colder than all three. He had known. Maybe not every detail. Maybe not every clip. But enough. Enough to let me be watched in my own home and call it help. Upstairs, I heard Lily stir through the baby monitor. I opened my eyes, stared at the rabbit on the table, and realized the camera was not the worst thing in my house. The worst thing was that my husband had mistaken surveillance for care and his mother's control for love. And in that moment, I stopped trying to prove that Margaret had crossed a line. I understood that from now on, I would have to prove who had been drawing the lines all along. After I hung up with Ethan, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the rabbit like it had personally insulted me. Lily made a soft little sound upstairs through the baby monitor, and that was the only thing that pulled me back into motion. I carried the rabbit upstairs, set it back on the shelf, exactly where Margaret wanted it, and adjusted its head by half an inch so the lens still had a clear view of the crib. Then I smiled at it, not because I was calm, because I wanted whoever was watching to think I was. If Ethan had told his mother I knew, the camera would disappear by dinner. If Margaret suspected I was onto her, she would retreat into that polished innocence she wore like perfume and deny everything until Ethan apologized to her for doubting. No, if I wanted the truth, I needed her comfortable. I needed her arrogant. I spent the rest of the morning becoming the version of myself she already believed in. I moved slowly. I let the laundry pile sit in the basket a little longer than usual. I fed Lily in the rocking chair instead of the living room, right there in full view, and when she spit up on my shoulder, I laughed softly and took my time wiping it away. I even left a burp cloth on the nursery floor for an extra 10 minutes before picking it up, because by then I understood exactly how Margaret thought. She did not want proof of danger. She wanted proof of imperfection. She wanted ordinary motherhood framed as incompetence. By early afternoon, I had made my second move. I ordered 2 indoor security cameras with same-day delivery, the small kind that looked like plain white plugs unless you knew what to look for. One went on the bookshelf in the upstairs hallway facing the nursery door. The other sat tucked behind framed wedding photos in the living room, aimed at the front entry and staircase. I set them up while Lily napped and linked them to a private account under an email Ethan did not know I still used. Separate password, separate cloud storage, separate world. Then I changed one more thing. Not the locks. Not yet. The spare key still hung where it always had, in the ceramic bowl by the mudroom door, because if Margaret came in uninvited, I wanted the footage. But I moved Lily's backup pacifiers, the gas drops, and the extra swaddles from the nursery drawer to the linen closet downstairs. Small things. Things Margaret might touch if she wanted to fix something. Things I could track if they moved. At 3:45, my phone buzzed. "Margaret." I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello, Margaret." "Claire, sweetheart," she said, warm as honey and twice as sticky. "I made that chicken casserole Ethan likes. I thought I would swing by around 5 and help with the baby so you can rest." Rest. The word landed exactly the way she intended. "That is kind of you," I said. "We would love that." I heard the smile in her voice. "Good. You sound tired." I looked straight at the rabbit on the shelf. "I am getting there," I said. At 5:02, she let herself in without knocking. The hallway camera caught her first, one hand on the casserole dish, the other slipping her phone into her purse after she crossed the threshold. She called out, "Anyone home?" in that bright little sing-song voice people use when they know very well they were expected. I was in the kitchen, bouncing Lily against my shoulder, and I made sure to look slightly frazzled when Margaret appeared in the doorway. Hair clipped up too fast, t-shirt wrinkled, formula pitcher still on the counter. Her eyes swept the room in less than a second, taking inventory. "Oh, honey," she said softly, setting the casserole down. "You really should not try to do everything alone." Then she kissed Lily's head, glanced toward the stairs, and for the first time since I found the camera, I saw it clearly. Not concern, not affection, anticipation. She was not here to help. She was here to confirm something. And this time, I was ready to let her. Margaret stayed for nearly 2 hours, and by the time she left, I knew more than I had in 6 weeks of forced smiles and careful silence. She did not hover the way she usually did. She performed. That was the first thing I noticed. Every movement felt slightly too polished, as if she knew she had an audience beyond me. She offered to hold Lily, then made a point of saying, "You should really go shower, sweetheart. A hot shower can do wonders when a mother starts looking this run down." I laughed softly and told her I was fine. She offered again 10 minutes later. Then once more when Lily started fussing near 6. "I have her," she said, already reaching. "You need to breathe." Need. Another one of her favorite words. Always wrapped in concern. Always aimed like a blade. I let her take Lily, but I stayed in the room. That seemed to irritate her in a way she tried hard not to show. She bounced Lily too much, then too little, then sighed when the baby rooted against her blouse and began to whimper. "She is overtired," Margaret murmured, not to me exactly, but not away from me either. That is what happens when babies do not have structure. I made a bottle without answering. I wanted her to keep talking. I wanted the hallway camera to catch every glance she threw toward the staircase, every tiny look she gave the nursery door like she was waiting for the next act in a play only she understood. Around 6:30, Ethan texted to say he was running late because a client call had dragged on. I stared at the message, then at Margaret standing in my kitchen, and something in me sharpened. "Actually," I said, forcing a yawn that was not entirely fake, "would you mind holding down the fort for 10 minutes? I forgot to pick up the pediatrician refill for Lily's vitamin drops. The pharmacy closes at 7. Margaret turned so fast it would have been funny in any other life. "Of course," she said. "Go. I have everything under control." There it was. Too quick. Too eager. I grabbed my purse, kissed Lily's forehead, and left through the front door while the living room camera recorded Margaret watching me go. But I did not drive to the pharmacy. I backed the car out, turned left, circled the block, and parked half a street down beneath a maple tree where the branches hid most of the windshield from view. Then I opened the security app on my phone. The hallway feed came up first. The upstairs landing was still. The nursery door was closed. The living room feed showed Margaret on the couch with Lily in her arms, humming and glancing at the clock. For exactly 90 seconds, she sat there like the world's most patient grandmother. Then she stood. She looked toward the front window, toward the street, toward where she thought I had gone. She adjusted Lily on her shoulder, walked straight upstairs, and disappeared into the nursery. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I switched to the hallway camera just in time to see her nudge the nursery door wider with her foot. She laid Lily in the crib, not roughly, not carelessly, but with the confident familiarity of someone who believed the room belonged to her. Then she did something that made my stomach drop. She stepped to the shelf, picked up the rabbit, and turned it slightly, fine-tuning the angle toward the crib and rocking chair. She checked the lens. Checked it, like she had done it before. Then she crossed to the dresser, opened the top drawer, frowned, and opened the second. Empty. Her mouth tightened. She moved to the diaper caddy, then the side basket by the rocker, then under the crib, searching with quick, irritated efficiency. Looking for something. Gas drops, pacifiers, swaddles. Whatever story she had planned, she was looking for props. Lily let out a thin, sleepy cry, and Margaret turned back fast, smoothing her expression as if the baby herself might report her. Then she leaned over the crib, lowered her voice, and said words I will never forget. "If your mother would just admit she cannot do this, we could stop all this nonsense." I froze in the driver's seat, staring at my phone, my hands suddenly ice cold despite the summer heat pressing against the windshield. Because in that moment, with my daughter in her crib and my mother-in-law talking over her like she was a witness instead of a child, I understood something I had not fully let myself believe until then. Margaret was not trying to help us survive new parenthood. She was trying to prove I did not deserve it. I did not storm back into the house. I did not call Ethan screaming. I did not march upstairs and snatch Lily out of Margaret's arms, even though every instinct in me wanted to. I sat in that parked car with the air conditioner humming weakly against the July heat, my phone glowing in my hand, and I forced myself to stay still. That was the hardest part. Not discovering the camera. Not hearing Ethan admit he knew. Watching the truth unfold in real time and understanding that if I moved too soon, Margaret would twist it into another example of me being emotional. So I stayed where I was. I switched from the hallway camera to the living room feed, then back again, tracking her movements like I was, documenting a stranger in my own home. A minute later, Margaret came out of the nursery carrying Lily and her purse. She sat in the rocker in the upstairs hall for a moment, adjusted the baby on her lap, and then slipped her phone out. She looked toward the stairs first, then toward the front window at the far end of the hall, the way people do when they want to be sure they are alone. Then she made a call. I could not hear the other voice clearly through the hallway camera, but I heard hers. Calm, controlled, confident. I am telling you, Daniel, she is barely holding it together, she said in a low voice, bouncing Lily gently like she was discussing weather instead of my life. Daniel, my father-in-law. He was quieter than Margaret, softer, the kind of man who spent 40 years surviving her by pretending not to notice what she was. No, Ethan still thinks it is stress, she continued. That is the only reason I have had to be subtle. I felt something cold slide down my spine. Subtle. She said it like she was proud of it. I am not saying she is dangerous, Margaret went on, and I nearly laughed at the lie because the next words were worse. I am saying she is unstable enough that if this keeps up, Ethan will have no choice but to let me help more. He cannot work 60 hours a week and come home to this every night. She shifted Lily higher on her shoulder and lowered her voice even more. I turned my volume all the way up and held the phone closer to my ear. If I can get a few more clips of her crying in the nursery or sleeping too deeply while the baby fusses, I can show him what I mean. He already agreed to the camera. He is halfway there. My mouth went dry. A few more clips. She was not collecting moments. She was curating them, building a private reel of my most exhausted, vulnerable hours and packaging them as evidence. I know what I am doing, she said after a pause, with that crisp little impatience she used whenever anyone questioned her. I raised a son. I know how to protect one. If Claire cannot handle motherhood, then Ethan and Lily will need structure, and frankly, I am the only one in this family capable of providing it. Lily made a tiny sound against her chest, and Margaret's voice softened instantly, syrup over steel. That is right, sweetheart. Grandma is making sure everything is handled. I sat frozen, my nails digging half moons into my palm, and suddenly the whole thing snapped into focus so clearly it almost hurt. This was never about concern. It was not even really about Lily. This was about possession. Ethan had grown up inside Margaret's system of order and obedience, and now that he had built a life outside of it, she was reaching for the only leverage she had left. Me. If she could make me look fragile, overwhelmed, unfit, then she could slide back into the center of his world as the necessary one. The trusted one. The one who knew best. I should have felt panic then. Instead, I felt something far more useful. Certainty. Because Margaret had just done what women like her only do when they are absolutely sure they cannot lose. She had said the quiet part out loud. And this time, I had all of it. I came back 7 minutes later with an empty pharmacy bag and the calmest face I had worn in weeks. Margaret was in the kitchen when I walked in, bouncing Lily against her shoulder and humming like she had spent the last few minutes doing me a favor instead of building a case against me over my sleeping child. She turned with that bright little smile, the one that always looked practiced. There you are, she said. I was just telling Lily that her mommy needs to remember the refill dates better. I held up the bag. They were out, I said. They said it will be ready tomorrow. Margaret nodded once, too quickly, and handed Lily back with the careful grace of a woman convinced she was winning. Ethan got home 20 minutes later, apologizing for being late, kissing my cheek, and thanking his mother for staying. I watched him move through the kitchen, loosening his tie, opening the casserole dish, slipping into the version of our family that had existed before I knew what was hiding inside it. I wanted to tell him everything right then. I wanted to take his phone, open the footage, and force him to listen to his mother say the words. Subtle and clips and halfway there. But I did not. Not because I was protecting him. Because I had finally understood him. If I showed him that footage while he was still in the habit of translating her, he would look for context. He would hear concern inside manipulation. He would ask whether she meant it the way it sounded. Men like Ethan do not break lifelong patterns in a single conversation. They need collision. They need proof they cannot soften. So I made dinner. We ate casserole. Margaret stayed just long enough to remind Ethan that Lily looked a little overstimulated and that I should really get a proper stretch of sleep before things spiral. Then she kissed his cheek, kissed Lily's forehead, and left with the smug serenity of someone already drafting the next move. The second her taillights disappeared, I carried Lily upstairs, changed her diaper, and laid her down in the crib while Ethan rinsed plates downstairs. The rabbit still sat on the shelf, pointed exactly where Margaret had adjusted it. I looked at it for one long second, then picked it up and turned it toward the wall. Not enough to disconnect it, just enough to send a message. When I came back down, Ethan was drying his hands with a dish towel. "We need to talk," I said. He looked up, tired but wary, like some part of him had known this moment was coming since our phone call that morning. We sat at the kitchen table after Lily fell asleep. No television, no dishes clattering, just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the clock above the stove. I placed my phone between us, screen down. "I know about the camera," I said. His face changed immediately. Not confusion, not surprise, shame. He sat back slowly, and for the first time since Lily was born, he looked younger than 36. "Claire," he started, but I raised my hand. "No, you are going to listen." Then I told him everything in the simplest possible order. The rabbit, the device logs, the wireless connection, his mother knowing things she should not know, her adjusting the camera herself, her searching the nursery, her saying I should admit I could not do this. I watched him pale a little more with every sentence, but I still did not turn over the phone. "Not yet. You said she was worried," I told him quietly. "Worried mothers do not stage evidence. Worried grandmothers do not collect clips of private moments. Worried people do not talk about being subtle." His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "What are you talking about?" he whispered. That was when I turned the phone around and hit play. The first video was the hallway feed. Margaret stepping into the nursery, adjusting the rabbit, opening drawers, searching. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened. Then I played the second clip. The call, her voice, calm as glass. "If I can get a few more clips." He already agreed to the camera. He is halfway there. Ethan stopped breathing for a second. I saw it happen. That terrible stillness when the version of your mother you built your whole life around collides with the one she actually is. When the clip ended, the kitchen stayed silent for so long I could hear the baby monitor hiss on the counter. Ethan stared at the dark screen like it might start over on its own and tell him something kinder. It did not. Finally, he looked up at me, and his voice came out thin and raw. "I did not know," he said. I believed that part. But belief was not enough anymore. "No," I said. "You just made it possible." The next morning, Ethan called in sick for the first time in the 3 years I had known him. He sat at the kitchen table in yesterday's t-shirt, staring into a mug of coffee he never touched, while Lily slept upstairs, and the whole house felt like it was waiting for a verdict. He had not slept much. Neither had I. Around 3 in the morning, I heard him in the nursery, standing beside the crib in the dark, whispering apologies to a baby too young to understand them and a wife too tired to be comforted by them. But by sunrise, apologies were no longer the point. Boundaries were. "She is going to call," Ethan said finally, voice rough. "She always calls around 9. I folded Lily's clean onesies at the counter and did not look up. Then answer. At 9:06, his phone lit up exactly on schedule. "Mom." Ethan stared at the screen for half a second, then put the call on speaker and set the phone between us. "Morning, sweetheart," Margaret said, light and cheerful. "How is my girl today?" Ethan's face changed in a way I had never seen before. Not anger. Not yet. Clarity. "Which one?" he asked. Silence. Tiny. Sharp. Then came the soft laugh she always used when she needed time. "Do not be difficult, Ethan." He reached for my phone where the videos were already queued, but I touched his wrist first. "Not yet." "Mom," he said, and his voice stayed painfully calm. "Did you put a camera in Lily's nursery?" Another pause, longer this time. "I think Claire is upset," Margaret said carefully. "I told you she has been overwhelmed, and I was only trying to make sure the baby was safe." You know how fragile these early weeks can be. There it was. Concern first. Deflection second. Me third. Ethan closed his eyes for 1 second, then opened them and hit play. Margaret's own voice filled our kitchen through the speaker. If I can get a few more clips. He already agreed to the camera. He is halfway there. The line went dead quiet. I could almost hear her mind working from 20 minutes away. Calculating. Revising. Searching for a door that was no longer there. When she finally spoke, the sweetness was gone. You should not have recorded me. Ethan let out one short laugh, empty and stunned. You should not have watched my wife in her own home. She started talking fast then, the way polished people do when the mask cracks, and they mistake speed for control. She said she had been protecting him. Protecting Lily. Protecting our family from my instability. She said she had seen mothers fall apart before. She said I was too emotional, too tired, too sensitive. She said if I had nothing to hide, I should have been grateful for help. I stood there in my own kitchen listening to another woman explain why violating my privacy was an act of love, and I felt absolutely nothing except certainty. Ethan looked at me, then back at the phone. Do not come here again, he said. Margaret inhaled sharply. Excuse me. Do not use the spare key. Do not show up uninvited. Do not contact Claire directly. If you want to see Lily, it will be when we decide, if we decide, and not 1 minute before. She started to cry then, but even that sounded organized. You are choosing her over your own mother? Ethan's answer came so quietly, I think it will stay with me forever. I am finally choosing my family. He ended the call, stood up, and walked straight to the mudroom. He came back a moment later holding the ceramic bowl with the spare key in his hand. He set it on the table between us like a relic from another life. That afternoon, he changed the locks. I removed the rabbit from the nursery shelf and sealed it in a cardboard box with the charger, the device logs, and printed screenshots from the camera feed. Documentation, not revenge. By evening, the house felt different again. Not healed, not simple, but ours. The nursery was still the same soft yellow. The rocking chair still creaked. Lily still made those tiny, sleepy sounds before settling into dreams. Only now, when I stood in the doorway and looked at her crib, I no longer felt watched. I felt protective, stronger than I had 6 weeks earlier, stronger than Margaret had ever believed I could be. She put that camera in my daughter's room because she wanted proof that I was failing. In the end, all it captured was the moment everyone finally saw who should never have been trusted near my child.